And welcome back. As we go ahead and jump into our next programming lesson, we of course have taken a good look at inner classes, but we have done this from the assumption that our inner class has been private. So let's just see what happens when we modify that to be public. So if an inner class is marked with the public modifier instead of the private modifier, as we've seen, they can be used in all the ways we've discussed so far, but it can also technically be used outside of that outer class. The way that you create an object of the inner class outside the outer class is a bit different for static and non-static inner classes. Let's go ahead and consider, though, the case of a non-static inner class first. So with non-static inner classes, when you're creating an object of a non-static inner class, you need to keep in mind that every object of the non-static inner class is associated with some object of the outer class. So to put it another way, to create an object of the inner class, you must start with an object of the outer class. This has to be true because an object of the inner class may invoke a method of the outer class or reference an instance variable of the outer class, and you cannot have an instance variable of the outer class unless you have an object of that outer class. If you, for example, were to change the class money from private to public, so the class definition now began public class bank account, public class money, then you could use an object of the non-static inner class money outside of the class bank account as illustrated by the following. Bank account equals new bank account. Bank account.money amount equals account.new money, quote, $41.99, end quote. This is now print line amount.get amount. This, of course, would produce the output 41.99. Now, you'll take note that the object amount of the inner class money is created starting with the object account of the outer class bank account as follows. Bank account.money amount equals account.new money, quote, $41.99. You'll also note that the syntax of the second line is not new account.money, quote, $41.99. This is an incorrect syntax. So really, if you think about the definition of the inner class money is an object of the inner class that can invoke a method of that outer class. However, if we were to look outside of that inner class, this is not true. Outside the inner class, an object of the inner class can only invoke methods of that inner class. So we could not have continued this previous sample code, which of course is outside the class bank account, and so therefore outside the inner class money with the following. System out.println amount.getBalance. The reason for this is because the meaning of amount.getBalance, it might be clear, but it's still not allowed. If you want something equivalent to, let's say, amount.getBalance, you should use the corresponding object of the class bank account. In this case, you would get account.getBalance. Recall also that account is actually a bank account object used to create an inner class object amount. All right, let's switch up gears here a little bit and look at static inner classes. So with a static inner class, you can create objects of a public static inner class, and to do so outside the inner class, in fact, you can even do so outside the outer class. So to do so outside the outer class, the situation is similar to, but not exactly the same as what we outlined for a non-static inner class. So if we look at the following outline, you have public class, outer class, public static class, inner class. We have a public void non-static method, public static void static method, some other members of the inner class, and then of course once we leave that class we have some other members of the outer class. We can create an object of the inner class outside the outer class using the following example. Outer class dot inner class inner object equals new outer class dot inner class. You'll note that the syntax is not simply just outer class dot new inner class. All right, this may seem like an inconsistency with syntax for creating the object of a non-static inner class. It may help to keep in mind also that for a static inner class, outer class.inner class is a well-specified class name, and all the information for the object is in that class name. So to remember the syntax for a non-static inner class, remember that for that case, the object of the outer class modifies how the new operator works to create an object of the inner class. Once you've created an object in a class, the object can invoke a non-static method in the usual way. inner object dot non-static method. You can also use the object of the inner class to invoke a static method in the same way, inner object dot static method. However, it's more common and much more clear to use class names when invoking a static method. Outer class dot inner class dot static method. So here's a quick tip for you, referring to a method of the outer class. If a method is invoked in an inner class and the inner class has no such method, then it is assumed to be an invocation of the method by the name in the outer class. We could, for example, add a method called show balance to the inner class money as outlined below. Public class bank account, private class money, private long dollars, private in cents, public void show balance is not print line, get balance. And then, of course, outside the money class, we have public string get balance, and then ending the bank account class. This invocation get balance is within the definition of the inner class money, but the inner class money has no method named get balance, so it's presumed to be the method get balance of the outer class bank account. But let's just suppose for a second that the inner class did have a method named get balance. Then this invocation get balance would be an invocation of the method get balance defined within the inner class. If both the inner and outer classes have a method named get balance, then you can specify that you mean the method of the outer class as follows. Public void show balance, this is not a print line, bank account dot this dot get balance. The syntax outer class name dot this dot method name always refers to the method of an outer class. So when we say bank account dot this means that we're referring to the this invocation of bank account as opposed to the this invocation of the inner class money. And let's just see how that public modifier can change a program. So here is that inner method demo that we have previously looked at. And just as a recap, just to run this program, if I enter in, let's say 5, we get 5 stars out. If I just simply go in here and change this private modifier to public and save it, and then rerun the program, you'll notice that nothing has changed. All right, and that's because we still have this static modifier up here, so this invocation is not affected. All right, of course, it says this should be modified in a static way, which of course we can do. We can easily come in and add that static modifier in, but I want to show you what's going to happen if I change this from a static to a non-static class. Now we have a non-static class in here, and even if I change this to private, all right, we're still going to have this issue because we would have to set up this as a instance of a class that has to be handled appropriately. So I'm just going to temporarily comment these 2 lines out since those are the 2 lines in question that we'd have to modify. So if we, of course, have a non-static class, one of the big things to keep in mind is that we have to set this up as inner method demo dot an inner class, and we'll give it a name of our object. Let's just call this one, we did obj, let's just call this one val, and we're going to equal a new, this is going to be inner method demo dot an inner class. And notice we have an error sitting in here right now. And so we might ask ourselves, well, how can we close this? Well, what did we forget? Well, let's put open close parentheses here. That seemed to take care of that piece of it. But then, of course, we have an error here. It's like, well, what does it need? In this case, we simply need to add the new modifier keyword, and that should take care of that issue. Then we, of course, can use this static method here, just like we had before. So we're going to do val.print stars, and let's just keep in a value. That's perfectly fine. And so if we run this, and let's just type 5, and we get our 5 stars. The biggest thing would be is between the 2 of these is if I wanted to create another class. So let's just go down here and create another class. And let's just say that this class is also going to have a main method in it, just for our testing purposes. Inside of this main method, if you wanted to create, let's say, something, because this is public, I can access that class directly. So if I were to say inner method demo, and let's just call this a object equals new inner method demo, we, of course, right now have no issues because it can access that class. Now, if I go ahead and say, well, what's if I want a use of this inner class? Well, let's go ahead and create ourselves our inner method, demo dot an inner class, and let's just call this one B object, and we'll make a new inner method demo dot an inner class. And of course, we need to finish this up here, add in our modifiers. Now, of course, we can access this, but what happens if I change this to private? Suddenly, we have an error. And because this is now a private modifier in here, this class would technically still be able to execute it just fine because it exists within inside this class. But because I've made it private, if I make another class that tries to access that inner class, it is no longer available. And that is going to be, of course, the biggest difference here between private and public classes, or if you would use any other kind of access, such as protected or package.